Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to thank you for being here, taking your time on this busy afternoon. I'm Captain Ron Gallivis, the Chief Public Information Officer for the Indiana State Police. Since September 29th, many of you have reached out asking to have a little bit of time with Superintendent Carter regarding some public comments that he made on that particular date. That's why we've asked you to gather here this afternoon. So Superintendent Carter does have a statement that he would like to make, and then he'll take a few moments afterwards to address some questions and facilitate those for you. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Superintendent Doug Carter.
Thank you, Rob. But just by way of explanation of what's going on behind me, the names that you see behind me are going to continue to scroll throughout the course of this period of time, and they're all homicide victims from Marion County, Indianapolis in 2023. Every one of them has a family member. Every one of them has somebody that cared deeply about who they are and who they were. And I think it's important to remember that because it certainly tells a pretty profound story. There are a couple issues I would like to address with you today. First, as many of you know, I very publicly and unapologetically criticized the Marion County Criminal Court judge on September the 29th. After the driver of a car traveling 121 miles per hour struck and killed 21-year-old Michaela Hankins Beaver, along with 14-year-old Christian Labea Gonzalez and 32-year-old Jose Gonzalez Jr. The crash was 10th and Midhofer, and all of you are aware of it. One vehicle was southbound on Midhofer. The driver of the vehicle that killed 3 people was westbound at 121 miles per hour. I know all of you, and we've all had long-standing relationships, and I'm really grateful that you're here. This is difficult for me because I'm stepping out and stepping into a system that I've spent nearly the last 40 years of my life working in. And I don't take it lightly. It's very important. I've always been, I will always be a passionate guy. And I acted with passion that day. But I also acted with tremendous empathy for those lives that were forever changed, kind of like those that are behind me today. When I heard that the driver was released on a $1,000 cash bond, I was furious for several reasons. Number one, we, not the court, will have to explain to the family members the circumstances by which the driver was released. We, not the court, deal with this firsthand every single day, and it's real. Number two was a stark realization of a failed system of justice, in my opinion. Number three was the empathy for law enforcement officers that continually deal with this from the front line every single day. The message that's sent to our citizens, not just here in Indianapolis, but in contiguous counties, in the central Indiana region and practically the entire state of Indiana. And it was, again, another example of an unaccountable judiciary and the degradation of a system that has a tremendous effect on our entire state. During that period of time on the 29th, I did attempt to reach out to the judge via a phone call, which was inappropriate of me. I know judges cannot have ex parte conversations. And she was correct in not calling me back. And I own that. And I will continue to own those issues when appropriate. Also, I learned that the bail was not just $1,000, but there was also a $50,000 surety bond. But that didn't change my opinion because of the $1,000 cash to be released. This was after the Marion County Prosecutor's Office even asked for a higher bond that was denied by the presiding judge. Secondly, what we're doing, ladies and gentlemen, is not working. It is not working. The very foundation of a civilized society is grounded upon a system of law, of personal accountability, and of consequences for those that choose otherwise. What we as a community experienced on the 29th was an anecdotal example, albeit with horrible, horrible consequences that should be an indicator of a flawed system. I'm currently in my 5th decade of service, and I feel enormous pressure to do all I can in the finite amount of time that remains for me. Anyone that believes that all is well in Marion County, or that it does not affect the rest of the state, is living under a rock, or they're living comfortably in a protected place in the confines of an office or with 4 walls, just doing what they've always done. All the while, law enforcement officers face tremendous challenges that none of us could have predicted. Over the course of the last 3+ years, we, people dressed like me, have been criticized, scrutinized, evaluated, and reviewed. Many of which came from out-of-state companies, civilian boards, or simply through the process of subjective opinion. My profession has never been in a lower place. I've said before, and will say again, on the local and national stages, that law enforcement officers are not without sin. And we deserve some of the criticism we've received. Law enforcement leaders around this country must acknowledge that fact and talk about it. And I will continue to be the voice of that until my final day. Racial bias, our inability to accept or understand different cultures, along with societal imbalances, have immensely affected our way of life, and that includes all of us. Without even asking, my comments on the 29th of September have been met with overwhelming support to construct and cause a review of the Marion County system. Several law enforcement associations, without my request, including the statewide FOP, the Indianapolis FOP, the Marion County IPD Retired Officers Association, to name a few. Representing thousands, these associations represent thousands of police officers around the state. And they support this initiative, again, because they know what happens here happens there, in their home communities. I've heard from elected mayors, both Republican and Democrat, from other elected officials from around the state, local community groups, citizens, lawyers, judges, prosecutors, and people I've never even met have shown tremendous support. Now is our time. Now is our time, and we must acknowledge our system is not working. But I want to make something very, very clear to everyone. This is no one's fault. This is no one's fault. No one agency, no one judge, no one prosecutor, no one police agency, no one mayor, no one city county council, and that list could go on and on. The position that we have found ourselves in has happened over time. But it's sure been fast-tracked over the course of the last couple of years. Our time is now to get really uncomfortable with each other, to take full responsibility for all of our citizens and for all of our actions, not just one part of the system, but everybody involved in the system. We must evaluate what we do, why we do it, and then be transparent with very objective results. We must establish criteria for evaluation and then unapologetically accept it. We must not live within a shadow of accountability. Rather, we must embrace a structure where we encourage and publicly discuss accountability, just like you expect from us. Judges and prosecutors alike should be perpetually accountable through objective evaluation, or at least an evaluation period, where they must explain their decision-making processes, especially for violent felons. Especially for violent felons. Prosecutors and judges, even unelected ones, have absolute immunity. which means they cannot be held personally liable for their actions. We can and should do better. While I have several ideas and thoughts for next steps, in my opinion, these are the things that I think could happen very quickly. We all should immediately, the courts should immediately review and realign the current Marion County bail matrix. The floor should be raised for all serious bodily injury and death cases and make it mandatory and non-suspend that bail. Non-suspended bail. That allows for higher bond for repeat offenders. Again, non-suspendable. Currently, the max bond in Marion County is $200,000, with the exception of zero bond for murder. I never requested anyone be held without a bond on the 29th of September. Never did I say that. But it's been indicated that I have over time. While bond is not and cannot be punitive and shouldn't be punitive, it should be a preventative measure to do all the system can to ensure another crime is not committed when that person's out on bail. This step could theoretically slow the circular system of justice that we're experiencing today, and maybe even could be a deterrent from a crime being committed in the first place. Bad guys and gals aren't afraid of this system, and it's important we say it. It's important we understand it, and it's important we acknowledge it. We should conduct a staff study to objectively evaluate shortages within the Marion County Jail, staff shortages within the Marion County Jail, within the Marion County Prosecutor's Office, and the judiciary. I've had several conversations with Ryan Mears. Sometimes we disagree, but he'll take my call every time, and I appreciate the partnership that we have. And at one time, he indicated to me he had over 200 pending homicides. Over 200 pending homicides. That rattled me a bit. So there are issues that have to be addressed associated with the number of people, staff, dealing with this law enforcement criminal justice crisis that we're facing today. We all know that they're understaffed. That's not a surprise. And the likely root cause of a coagulated and backed up system that could lead to the outcomes we're facing today. Number 3, acknowledge that without accountability, our system of justice, both internally and externally, will irrevocably change. This isn't somebody else's problem, it's our problem. In other words, if you like it the way it is, leave it alone. Leave it alone. If you don't, we should engage it like never before. Number 4, check egos at the door. Politics, past events or circumstances, or whatever else is all yesterday's news. We all should learn from our history, but we should not dwell on the past because our citizens deserve better. Our citizens deserve better. Number 5, poll our citizens to measure not only their confidence in our system of justice, but more importantly, do they feel safe? And if not, why? I think it'd be antithetical to do anything else. We should ask them that very, very question. And I think we all probably know the outcome. And I suspect that it will rock our conscience. In closing, I was recently on the scene of a multi-agency police action and spoke to a couple of very young IMPD officers while I was there. Both told me that they work in the most dangerous parts of the city, and they love it. Because more than 95% of the citizens and the people they interact with like them, appreciate them. Sometimes they don't look the same or have the same life experiences. I think what that tells us is we all, no matter the color of our skin or the circumstances of our life, want to feel safe in our homes and safe in our neighborhoods. That is our charge. Nothing more, nothing less. In closing, Indianapolis is Indiana City. Indianapolis is Indiana City. It's your city and mine, even if you don't live here. It's the heartbeat of our state. I look forward to the future and hope with all of my soul that we get really uncomfortable with each other in the coming days, weeks, months. I hope we get really uncomfortable with each other. Put politics aside, hate me, criticize me, whatever you would choose. We never can accept the way it is. Our citizens deserve better, and we all know what has to happen. We all know what has to happen. And as I sunset in my career, I am not going to leave it as broken as I see it. And I will do everything within my power to participate and help along the way. I'll take any questions that you might have.
If the Supreme Court in 2019 led an effort to reevaluate the bail system across the state of Indiana, and if Marion County's bail matrix is based on those Supreme Court recommendations from 4 years ago, are you aiming your criticism at the Marion County system, or are you really aiming it at the Supreme Court and the process it went through?
Well, I think that's up for them to debate that. There's state law, and then there's rules of the court. And I think there should at least be the conversation, Russ. It's a good question. But again, I think that the two of them have to debate that. And it would be a shining example, not just to other cities and areas within Indiana, but I think it would be viewed as a very progressive step by those contiguous states that are around us. Because again, the easy thing to do is follow a matrix and then do what the matrix says. If A happens, you go to B. B happens, you go to C. But what you don't have to consider is what's the consequence of that bond. What's going to happen to a police agency, specifically IMPD here in Marion County, when they continually chase that same individual? You know, the gun crimes task force is something we could spend a lot of time on. But that goes, those guys and gals, and we are participants in that, go after the worst of the worst people. Why? Because they're the ones creating fear in our communities. There was an article recently about the number of police actions, specifically with IMPD. Well, what I'll tell you is, in large part, the number of increase in police action shootings is because of someone else's action, someone else's behavior. So I think we need to be careful here, and we need to talk about what we know, not what we think. So I guess back to your question, Russ, they should be able to sit down in a room and talk about it, because they both should acknowledge it's not working. What else?
Superintendent, in this specific situation with the crash, what would you have liked the bond to have been?
If you compare the bonds to what previously has happened, the prosecutor's office asked for a higher bond. I think that bond was $80,000. That was from the prosecutor's office. So that should have been the bond. You know, when we turn this case over to the Marion County prosecutor, any city or county in Indiana, that case then becomes that of the prosecutors. So the prosecutor asked for an increased bond for this particular individual, but the presiding judge denied it.
Now, you say to kind of change the bond matrix, it would be to protect the community. What are the current statistics of the number of people who are arrested for committing another crime while out on bond?
I don't have that answer for you, but I can certainly get it for you. There's been a lot of discussion about that over time. But again, I mentioned the word anecdotal. We got to be careful with anecdotal issues to define an entire system, right? So I think most people would agree that there's no fear of the system. Again, bond can't be punitive, but it can make it difficult to get out of a place you don't want to be. And I really think that there should be some really strong conversation. Again, violent offenders. I'm not talking about property crimes, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people that commit violent crimes against people like you and your families. It should not be easy to get out. It should not. And there's been discussion and very, very strong criticism of me associated with, well, the bond's the same in other counties. No, I'm sorry. The other counties aren't feeling and seeing what we're seeing here in Marion. It's starting to, but not yet.
Doug, why is the profession in its lowest place that you've ever seen? What tells you that?
I think no matter what we do, we're wrong. And we're guilty until we prove ourselves innocent. And guys like me should be the ones held accountable for inappropriate actions by the rank and file. And I make every single attempt to do that and be as transparent as I can. We are human beings, we're not machines. We have families and kids and struggles and challenges and all the things that everybody else has, but yet we're expected to be something other than human. And that's part of the reason I think that the system has kind of lost its way. Because we're dealing with death, dying, destruction, hurt, pain, and sorrow every single day. Every single day. And we need the system to support what we're trying to accomplish. If we have a bad apple, we're going to get rid of that bad apple. There's bad apples in every profession. We learned a lot since May the 20th of 2020 with George Floyd. Our profession learned a lot, and I welcome that criticism. I welcome that criticism. And all that we've done since then to try and understand disparate cultures and understand what we're doing and what does this mean? All the while, we're beaten and spit on and stabbed and killed. And I got to tell you what I see within the ranks of IMPD, who's obviously the front line of safety and security in this county. I'd go anywhere with them. I'd go anywhere with them and do all I can do to support them. Their lives are changed forever. Can you imagine dealing with that level of violence every single day of your life? But they still have the desire to go right back out to the front line every day and do it all over again. So anyway, we're a piece of the puzzle. We're not the entire puzzle. And none of this will happen successfully without your involvement, every single one of you in this room. None of it will happen. I've gotten used to some hard questions from you, especially from this guy named Russ McQuaid. But I'm good with it. I'm good with those questions. Ask them. Ask them. We have nothing to hide, and we'll do the very best we can to do the right thing. Not always a popular thing, but we'll always try and do the right thing. We need the support of the system. If we don't, it's going to continue to go south.
If you say the judges are unaccountable, aren't they accountable to the voters at the ballot box?
Not in 4 counties in Indiana, not in Marion, Allen, Lake, or St. Joe, because they're slated judges. They're not elected judges.
You've multiple times mentioned, put your politics aside, put your ego aside. When you're having these conversations, or you've attempted to have these conversations, is that something that you're finding getting in the way of finding a solution to this problem?
Yeah, that's another great question. I think all of us feel comfortable in our own skin, generally speaking. We don't want to accept criticism. We don't want anybody to ask why. We don't want anybody to say, have you thought about doing something different? I've found in this role, and I've been in the superintendent of the state police almost 11 years, that the people that have the best solutions to problems are oftentimes people that don't understand the magnitude of the problem itself. All I'm asking the judges to do, and everybody else associated with the system, come to the table. What we may find is what we're doing is right. There's nothing we can do about it. What we may find is we can make some minor changes. What we may find is there's more unity than there is division. But I think everyone would agree that the global imbalance right now that's happening around the world, especially since last weekend, is very profound and very real. I've always lived under the premise that I can control my own small little world, but I can't control anything else. And if I can encourage the conversation, then my career's been successful.
Do you think the legislature has a role in this? You've called, for lack of better words, called them out before for things that you don't agree with. Do you think that they need to be involved in this conversation?
The legislative process could absolutely be a part of this. Could absolutely be a part of this. Do I think it's necessary for us to accomplish anything? No, I don't. But could there be legislative ideas? Yes, and those are being discussed.
Now, Superintendent, you mentioned that some of these issues in Marion County are starting to bleed out into some other areas, and you mentioned your conversations with leaders in those areas. Now, a couple of minutes ago, you said you can't really rely on anecdotal evidence in this type of situation. How can you be certain that what they're telling you is factual and not just anecdotal evidence? And is this a problem here in Marion County simply because Marion County has a much bigger population than the rest of the state that has maybe a wider socioeconomic status, and therefore, because of the population and because of the scrutiny of the people in this room, it gets more attention than elsewhere in the state?
There's a lot to that question. You'll like some of my answer, you won't like the other parts of it. Any inference that we should just stay the same because people live in a different economic position, my word, not yours, than anybody else is ridiculous. Whether you're living in a small town, violent crime is relative. We represent every single Indiana county. 55 or 56 counties in Indiana, we have a very strong presence, especially with significant events. So that presence matters. There's not a day goes by that I'm not talking to a police chief or a sheriff. Not a day goes by. And their perception of this is similar to mine. Carmel Republican candidate for mayor, Sue Finkham. I received a note from her earlier this afternoon, and she attached data from Carmel PD associated with the increase in crime. So if we're going to respond just to the crime, I think the system has some responsibility. What do we do about the perception that's reality to people? Do you feel comfortable here at 2 in the morning? You've answered my question. Most don't. And I hate to say that. I hate to say that. I hate to say that. But it's just the reality of today. Can we fix that? You know, I live in this world that I really believe in people. I believe that there are consequences for actions. I believe that if people come together to try and make a positive outcome, they can do it, whether it's on a Little League team or running the state police or holding any elected office. It doesn't matter. If we accept it the way it is, we own it. If you want to give this to your kids the way it is, great. I don't. I don't. Thank you, everybody, very, very much.
Thank you very much, everybody. That concludes our press conference. Be safe and well, and travel safe. Thank you.